welcome to another episode of Kealaka'i. I am your host, Valerie.
And I'm Myco. Today we are grateful for having a wonderful guest joining us for this exciting episode. But before we introduce our guest, if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, please do so on Buzzsprout, YouTube, and Spotify. Valerie, time to introduce our guest.
Okay, so our guest for today is Kealani Netane. Kealani Netane is a native Hawaiian and Samoan author who was raised on the leeward side of Oahu in Hawaii, where she currently resides. She writes children's books and is the author of Tala Learns to Siva, her newly released book just this summer 2024. Kealani is a co-founder of Pacific Islanders in Publishing, which amplifies current Pacific Islander book creators, and she runs the bookstagram Little Pacifica Readers, where she shares current Pacific Islander children's book. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from BYU Provo and graduated high school from Kamehameha Schools Kapalama. Let's welcome Kealani Netane. Yay!
Hey, okay. It's so nice to have you here with us today for this episode. Welcome to the podcast. And we are here to talk about you and your new book, Tala Learns to Siva, and basically your journey being an author. We heard that when your husband was going to school here at BYU-Hawaii, you were working at the Reading and Writing Lab. How was working there for you? How does working in the Reading and Writing Lab before help you with your writing style? And how did you find your style?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. By the way, I love everything that your podcast does, and I've listened to a few episodes before, so I was so excited when you invited me to come and join you today. My husband went to school here from 2017 to 2019. We lived in TVA, and at the time, there was an opening at the Reading and Writing Center to be the assistant coordinator. So I applied and I got the job there. It was such a wonderful time. I was able to spend a ton of time with the tutors and with the students who came in frequently. The biggest thing that my work there taught me was the grammar. I wasn't that great at grammar before working there, but after I worked there, I learned so much about adjective clauses and adverb clauses and how all those can work together to tell a story. And especially when I worked with the ESOL students, that's what it's called, yeah, ESOL students, then I learned how to phrase things so that people can understand. And so my time spent there really helped me to formalize my writing and make it into a structure that is readable.
Okay, so just to be clear, like, have you ever liked writing before applying to that particular job, specific job in reading and writing lab?
I was more of a reader than a writer. So I've loved reading my whole life. I was a library kid, and my mother would take us to the library maybe once a month, and then in the summer every single week. So I was constantly reading, and then even as an adult I continued my love for reading, but before then I wasn't really writing. just enjoying all the stories that come from books. That's where my heart was. And then really in the Reading Writing Center I learned, like, oh, maybe I can form these kinds of things too.
Would you say that that affected you with with your writing, like just being exposed with books, that affected you with your writing?
Yes, definitely. Because you can't really write unless you know what stories have come before you. So you really have to immerse yourself in the storytelling world. And so even before my love of books came, I had such a strong love for storytelling. Really from my grandmother's, that's where that love came from. I would drive around the island with my grandma, and she would stop and tell me stories about each place, about where she grew up. She grew up in Kauailoa, in the ranch right now that's like filled with tourists. They all want to see the turtles. But at the time when my grandma was growing up there weren't any tourists. She just grew up on the ranch, and she would go with her grandma, and they would pick limu in the ocean. They would ride their horses all around. So those are the kinds of stories that I grew up with my grandma telling me those stories here in Hawaii. And then also my dad's side is Samoan. So my grandma on my dad's side would tell me stories of growing up in Samoa, and then also stories of what it was like to immigrate from Samoa to America. So that's where the love of stories itself came from. And then when I started reading on my own, then my love of books came. And so blending those two together, the cultural stories and the stories that you find in books, really helped to kind of visualize what my personal storytelling looks like. Because when you're writing something down, you really have to understand what is your voice and what is your style.
I feel like that's so amazing. I feel like I don't want to say that, well, we're a writer. We write for Alaka'i, right? But at the same time, like, we write stuff mostly about feature stories about other people, not exactly about our own voices. But at the same time, we have this thing called our styles, right? But how do you think the culture affects your personal writing style from like where you came from?
I think that has the most effect on my writing style. I didn't really set out to write cultural stories, but it kind of just flew out of me. I couldn't control myself, not control, but I couldn't not tell this kind of story. And I think as we're writing, even in a magazine such as Alaka'i, you're writing from your lens. So whatever questions you're asking the person, whatever side of the story you seem to grasp onto, that comes from our own experiences and how we grew up. And especially within our culture, we grasp onto certain aspects of a story. And so that really flows out into my writing in this book, Tala Learns to Siva, and in other writings that I'm working on now.
So thank you for that, Kealani. So regarding writing, what are the books that you have published aside from like Tala Learns to Siva, your newly published book? What are the other books that you have published?
So Tala Learns to Siva is my very first book that's out in the world. And then I have another book that's coming out. It hasn't been announced yet, so I can't say much about it, but I'm almost done working on the edits.
Yay.
And then we have already chosen an illustrator, and we're going to publicly announce the book next year, and then it'll come out in a couple years.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So with your very first book, Tala Learns to Siva, what is the significance of it to you and to your native Hawaiian and Samoan heritage? Because like Siva is a Samoan term, right?
Yes.
So tell us more about it.
Yeah, so I first came up with the concept in 2020. I was in the pandemic lockdown, just like everyone else. At the time, I had 2 kids. I had a newborn baby, and I had a 2-year-old. So my husband was working, and I was a stay-at-home mom. After I finished working from the Reading Writing Center and he graduated, he did all of the job things, and then I stayed home with our kids. So yeah, I was just sitting there. Not that I was doing nothing, but I felt like my brain wasn't working as much as it could. So I just began to think, like, what are things that I love to do? And as I was searching for what that would be, I was reading books to my daughter. And the books that we were reading were books that were celebrating people from all over the world. She's very much into celebrating different cultures from all over the world. And I began to wonder, like, oh, where's a book like this for my culture, for her culture, that she could see herself in? And I wasn't really able to find what I was looking for. There's so many books out there, but it just wasn't what I was looking for her specifically. So then I began writing, and my first thought was, what does it look like when a child first sees a taulunga? And a taulunga is a Samoan traditional dance, mainly danced by women, and then also there's some dance by men as well. But you first begin dancing this when you're a child and then you grow up in it. So I thought to myself, what does that look like? And how could I put this on a page? So then I just started writing. And at first it was this really, really long story. So in picture books, you want it to be around 500 to 600 words. But at this time, my story was like 1,200 words. I was kind of going overboard. But I pared it down a lot. And it became this story of a girl who sees her auntie dance, yearns to learn it so much that she begs her auntie to teach her. And so she goes on this journey of trying to dance, failing, and then right when she thinks she has it down, she learns that there's another step that she has to go through. And then she's able to find the strength to dance for her grandma at her grandma's birthday party and really tell the story of not only her ancestors, but also her life now, because the dance she does is about her family immigrating to Hawaii from Samoa, because the book takes place here in Hawaii. And so it's about her family immigrating here.
Wow. You mentioned that you have kids, right? And the whole story about you reading all these wonderful books about other different cultures to your daughter, and like you trying to find something from your culture to incorporate that in your storytelling to your daughter. How old is your daughter again?
Now she's 6, but at the time when I was writing, she was 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It takes
a while.
Yes, it takes a long time to publish a picture book.
But how many? I just want to get technical a little bit. How many drafts did you do before you got to your piece right here?
I have tried to count, but I realized that the very first drafts that I wrote, I was so emotional about it. I really didn't like it that I deleted it and I didn't keep it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I should have kept it just for the sake of, of having it. Yeah. But I kind of came out to about 30 drafts.
Wow. All 1,200 something words, or did you have it all break down in like 500, 600?
The draft that I can go all the way back to was 1,200 words. But then what happens when you're writing is that a lot of people think that writing is a solitary thing, but it's actually not. You have to make friends, and your friends will help you to edit. So those are called beta readers. And as I asked other people to critique my work, then it got, I don't want to say like more condensed, but I got more specific in my writing so that I could use the least amount of words to say the same thing. And then after I got all my beta readers, then I queried. So the next step, if you want to traditionally publish with a large publishing company in the US, you have to get a literary agent. Yeah. So the literary agents that I sent my query letter to, asking them if they would please be my agent, then I found one that said yes, and she had me edit some more. And then when we went out on submission, so after you get a literary agent, then the literary agent sends your work to a bunch of editors at the different publishing companies, and then you have to hopefully like cross your fingers that, and not only does an editor have to say yes, but then their editorial team has to say yes, and then all of the departments at the publishing company, the marketing department, what other, I don't know, they have like a bunch of different departments, financial department, all those art department, everybody has to say yes to the book. So one editor said yes out of, I think we sent my book out to like 15 editors or 20 editors, but one said yes, and then she again had me edit my book. So it went through many edits before it ever got to this finished piece.
Yeah, because I'm hopefully in the future, because I'm doing creative writing as a minor right now. I've gone through most of the classes. I have my last one next semester, which is great. There's also publishing happening right now. I think we're doing fiction and nonfiction. And we've always talked about, having all of these words on paper and then you cutting out some stuff there. How does that feel? Or how did that feel when you were editing? And does it really make the difference of you cutting out some stuff, or you feel like it should have been there or should not have been there. How does that feel?
There's a term in the writing world that everybody uses. It's called kill your
Your
darlings.
Love that.
And you really do have to take away some parts that you're like, I need this for the story. But then when multiple people are telling you that you don't need it, then you step back and you have to look at it from someone else's lens and think, is this really needed? And I really do believe that once I was able to cut out all the fluff, that I was able to get to the heart of the story. And I think that's the most important part when you're editing, is that you just stay true to your own voice. Because even though, so there's two parts of it, because there's a lot of people telling you, you need to cut this, you need to cut this. But then you have to stay true to your own voice and your own style. And you can't lose the essence of the story that you want to tell. So you have to be able to balance that, the suggestions of other people and then what you want to do. So one suggestion that my editor, and she's the one that's at Scholastic, she suggested, what if we change it? Because right now it's the auntie that's teaching Tala how to dance. She goes, what if we changed it to a mother-daughter story instead? So I tried it out and I changed my whole story to be a mother-daughter story. But it just read like it wasn't what I pictured, because in the Samoan culture, same within many of our Pacific and Asian cultures, it's so focused on extended family that I wanted to include the extension of our family. So I did it, but then she agreed with me that it just wasn't working. So then we went back to the auntie teaching Tala how to dance, and it really blossomed from there.
Okay.
So, thank you so much, Kealani. And now we've been talking about like your new book, Tala Learns to Siva. We're excited to hear some pages or like readings regarding that.
Sure.
So, is it okay if you read some of the pages of your new book?
Yes.
And we'll go from that.
I'm going to start from where Auntie Sina is dancing, and at this point, Tala is just watching and seeing her dance. So it says, Auntie Sina's hands danced around her body like rolling waves. Her feet sailed across the floor like a canoe on the sea. Her smiling eyes invited everyone on her journey. Afterward, Tala ran to her. Please teach me to dance like you. I can teach you as Grandma taught me, Auntie Sina replied. First, Auntie taught her to bend, feet together, knees bent, as if hovering over a chair. Tala's legs wobbled. Then Auntie taught her to curl her hands. She bent her fingers in and out, over and over. Tala's wrists stiffened. Last, Auntie taught her to se'e. Standing tall, she placed her feet in a V, heels together, toes apart, then shifted to toes together, heels apart, back and forth, moving sideways. Tala's knees buckled. I can't do it, Tala cried. So those are just a couple pages. After this, Tala goes on to practice and practice and practice, and then she continues until she can finally do it in the end.
That's so nice. I'm excited to like read it. I don't know if there probably there's not an online copy, right?
It's ebook, but it is in the library here
Yay.
on
Oh,
BYU
okay.
campus.
Okay, okay. That makes me feel good because there's like not only an online copy. Why am I stuttering? But not only an online copy, but or like an ebook, but there's also a copy at the library. Okay.
I noticed something as well. So you did mention about like having the inspiration from your daughter, like the storybooks. I was wondering, are you ever thinking of making longer ones? Maybe like a book about maybe your experiences or other people's experiences in like having incorporated the Hawaiian and Samoan cultures that you have. Have you ever thought about that, like in the future?
Yes, I'm actually trying right now. It's difficult. My hardest thing is just writing the full first draft. I've written, how many books have I written so far? I've tried writing, I think I'm on like my fourth book that I've tried writing. And I always get to about a third of the way into the book, and then I want to scrap it all and start all over. So that's my issue right now. I just have to get through the first draft, and that's proves to be the hardest thing for me, because when it gets to the editing phase, it just flows a lot easier for me.
Just also wondering, who was the first one that you showed the store or the drafts to? Did you show it to a family member or your husband or your daughter or just the editor?
The very first person I've shown every single draft to is my husband. And it's funny because he wouldn't say that he's a reader himself, but he is very, very good at listening and giving feedback. And he knows me so well that he's able to tell me, like, I don't think that's working, or yeah, that's really amazing. So it's been fun.
See, that's like the support that you have.
I was just wondering if, like, have you ever had the moment, like, before you have the very first draft, or before you even thought about, like, writing the Tala Learns to Siva? Have you ever had that particular moment where, oh, I need to write a book about, like, my culture, like my heritage, like about Siva, or like not Siva, but like learning about learning. Wait, cut. Learning to Siva. Have you ever had that kind of moment where, oh, I need to, like, write it on my notes, or have to tell it to my husband so that I can pitch my idea regarding that?
Yes, especially when I first started deciding that I was going to be a writer, I used to write on my notes app on my phone. And there's been a few times where I'm driving and I have this idea in my head and I have to pull over the car and hurry up and type it out before I forget it. So even when I'm writing, I actually use Google Docs, because sometimes I'll just get different ideas. Even while I was writing Tala Learns to Siva, that I'm like, oh, that's what I need to change. So if I'm not at home, I can just hurry up and write down that idea before I forget it.
How does a normal writing day usually look like for you? Where do you get your inspiration most of the time? And how do you also deal with, like, writer's block? Because we all have that.
Yes.
It's the most annoying thing in the world. But how do you deal with those type of things?
I really only dedicate an hour of writing per day, and it's not like
We spend hours.
An hour. Wow.
1 hour. That's all I have. I'm still a stay-at-home mom. I have a 2-year-old now. I have 3 kids. And so I have to limit myself to a time that works for our family. And then I'm also reading a lot. So I actually spend more time reading than I do writing. And that's how I deal with writer's block, is by reading and going back to the things that I enjoy. So if I'm writing something and it's just not working, I'll either just stop, put it aside, start reading, or I'll watch TV, or I'll go on a walk and try to work that out. I find that if I'm doing something else, then it comes into my brain easier.
All right. I totally agree with all the walking and the reading. I know, because, like, I feel like not a lot of people understand that before you write something, you have to read. And that's one thing that I'm trying to still reconcile with, because I'm not much of, like you, when I was younger, I go to the library often, I borrow books, I read to my mom, I storytell when my mom comes after, like, work at home. And then slowly transitioning out of the kid thing, and you forget how to read, or you don't read as much anymore because you have books, textbooks, and a lot of other things happening in your life. And I'm trying to,
I will say it's much easier to read after college, because in college you have to read what your teacher assigns you.
True.
And out of college you can just read whatever you want.
yeah.
So a lot of my friends, there's this fan fiction, like, on Wattpad. Like, they're not necessarily reading like the books that people tell you to read in college. People are just reading whatever they want to read, and it's a lot easier.
And I just have a final question, like, because we're talking about, like, being an author and all of those other stuff. How do you balance your life being a mom and as an author as well?
I will say this is something that is for me, it's very easy to balance the two because my kids love books as well. So the books that I read to them, because I'm trying to write a novel right now, where I'm reading like chapter books to them. So my kids are 6, 4, and 2, and even then they will sit there and listen to a whole chapter. So it's helping them a lot as it helps me. So we do this together.
Teach them young.
Yes.
Teach them young, immerse them young.
Immerse them young. But I will say they are tired of Tala Learns to Siva. They don't want to hear this book anymore because they've been to a lot of the library visits and school visits with me. So they're okay to move on to other books.
Pretty sure they're wanting to hear more from their mom, though. Okay, Kealani, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wonderful story, your culture as well, and some tips and the whole process of going through the publication, having your book published. And we truly enjoyed the story as well from a few pages of the book. And to all our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode.
Don't forget to share this week's episode to your friends and family. These are your hosts, Valerie,
Myco.
See you next week, guys.